Better late than never this week with a next year on my album list. It was the year I was 11, and my tastes were changing, but they were also staying the same. There's quite a few things that I didn't have on this list because I don't have it on CD, but the albums I have, I'll talk about. Near the end of the year, I had a huge upheaval in my life when we moved across country, and that also would affect me in the years to come. The year was 1974. I'm TC Kirkham, and this is Vinyl Recall. Welcome to Vinyl Recall. I'm TC Kirkham, the Kirkham Report. This is my take on Vinyl Richie's year-by-year top 10 lists of favorite albums. Most people have classic rock. You guys know me already. I have done everything but classic rock. And we're up to 1974. I'm finding a very big dearth in my album collection in some of these years. I have a lot of 45s. That's all I pretty much bought back then. But I've gone back and gotten a few of these. Some of these I just bought in the last couple of years that I loved. Also want to ask you to bear with me. I'm late this week by a day and probably a few hours with this show. And I'm a little bit lame, as you can see. I had a medical procedure on Tuesday and left me with a nice big bruise on the bottom of my arm. It was a serious thing and it was pretty scary, but everything is okay. Everything turned out perfectly, so that's good. If you want to know what happened, I can tell you at some point, but I just, the last year has been kind of hectic for me because of a diagnosis that turned out on Tuesday to be a misdiagnosis, and I'm very, very happy about that. So let's talk about 1974. My memories of 1974, they're a mixed bag. We were still living in central Ohio. By that point, we were living in a small town outside of Newark called Marne, if you can actually call it a town. It had like 400 people, and it wasn't actually, I don't think it's actually an incorporated community. Fifth and sixth grade, my tastes were changing, and 1974 brought a lot of good stuff that I got on singles, but not that much. I had to scramble to find 10 albums from that year, even ones I bought recently. But these are ones I listened to, or I listened to the music and since, or have fallen in love with them since I bought them, and they're all from that right year, so that counts, right? Of course it does. It's my list. The biggest memory I have of 1974 wasn't from music, it was from weather. April 3rd, 1974 was the date of the great super outbreak. I spent, that was a parent-teacher conference day at school. My mom went in to talk to my teacher, Mrs. Carpenter, who I adored, and my stepfather and I hung out in the playground waiting for her, and we were talking. It was only 10 o'clock in the morning. It was already 85 degrees out. Humidity was way up, and Frank and I talked back and forth. It's going to be a bad storm day. We had no idea how bad. We lucked out. In our area, we got several severe thunderstorms. Marne was across the state from Xenia, which was almost wiped out that day. And it was a day from hell for something like 12 states. Much of the really bad stuff was Indiana, Xenia, Ohio, Bradenburg, Kentucky, and several places in Georgia and Alabama. It was a bad night. If you want to look it up, go on Wikipedia and look up Super Outbreak of 1974. It was a terrifying day. And for me, it helped cement my fascination with weather bulletins. I've always been that way. I'm kind of a geek that way. What can I say? Anyway, let's get to the music of 1974. There was a lot of great stuff that came out. What I loved was different than what everybody else loved. And as I said, some of these I picked up along the way and found that I love them too, but I've always loved the acts or people therein. I'm going to start at number 10, and you're going to laugh. But this was the first pairing of these two, and it was well done, really well done at the time. And every successive album got a little bit weaker, and by the time they reached 1978's Going Coconuts, they were pretty terrible. But this is the debut album from Donnie and Marie Osmond. I'm leaving it all up to you. I played this sucker to death when when it came out. I think it came out in October. It was still fairly new when we moved. I'm leaving it all up to you. Take Me Back, A Day Late, A Dollar Short, Everything Good Reminds Me of You, Gone, Morning Side of the Mountain, True Love, It Takes Two, The Umbrella Song, and Let It Be Me. Of course, It Takes Two would later become a running theme song for their variety show a year and a half later. And they had big hits with I'm Leaving It All Up to You and Morning Side of the Mountain. I've always loved the whole album. They were terrific at the harmonies. Really did great stuff. I've always thought this picture of Donnie on the back cover looks like a Madame Tussauds waxwork. I honestly don't think that's Donnie. I never did. I always thought it looked too perfect. Marie looks fine. But it's hard to tell. You never can tell with that. Produced by Mike Curb. Of course, it is my pop stuff. Sorry, I'm not supposed to hold stuff with my right hand. But it's a good album, and I always loved it. Donnie and Marie Osmond. I'm leaving it all up to you. Number 10. Number 9 is a transcript, a radio transcript that was done. I don't even know if it was actually on the radio. It may have been on closed circuit radio. It may have been one of those kinds. Because it was made for the U.S. Army. And it says recruitments and representatives in here. The album is falling apart. The sleeve is falling apart. I actually got this from a family friend. And it was the first album I ever got that led me to my obsession with collecting radio transcriptions. I have quite a few in my collection, including various interview shows, American Top 40, Casey's Top 40, Countdown America. I collect those. So if you ever have radio transcriptions you want to get rid of, get in touch with me because I'll take them. This is number 9, and the reason it's number 9 is what's included in the album. This is Robert W. Morgan for Today's Army. It is a 2-record set. Each show is a half hour long. It includes all the top pop hits from March 1974. I'm going to hold this up very gingerly because I'm not supposed to hold stuff with my right hand. But that's what it looks like on the inside. Program number 1 in and around the ads for the Army that Robert W. Morgan, who was a great DJ from, I want to say, well, I know his later years were spent on K-Earth in Los Angeles, but he was on a number of top 40 stations out there. Program 1 includes In the Mood from Bette Midler, Show and Tell from Al Wilson, Going Out of My Head, Can't Take My Eyes Off You by the Letterman, Seasons in the Sun by Terry Jacks, Let Me Be There by Olivia Newton-John, Life is a Song Worth Singing by Johnny Mathis, and Joy Part 2 by Isaac Hayes. Program 2 includes You're 18 from Ringo Starr, Until You Come Back to Me, Aretha Franklin, California Soul, The Fifth Dimension, I Love, Tom T. Hall, Eris 2 from Mos Adotis, Living for You, Al Green, How Long Has This Train Been Gone, Billy Preston, and Slick from Herb Alpert and the Tijuana Brass. Program 3 includes Love's Theme from the Love Unlimited Orchestra, The Way We Were, Barbra Streisand, You'll Never Get to Heaven, The Stylistics, Midnight at the Oasis, Maria Muldaur, On a Night Like This, Bob Dylan, Goodbye Yellow Brick Road, Elton John, and Rhapsody in Blue from Diodato. And number 4, Program 4, includes Seasons in the Sun by Terry Jacks, In the Mood by Bette Midler, Don't Mess Around with Jim by Jim Croce, I Like What You Give by Jose Feliciano, I've Got to Use My Imagination by Gladys Knight and the Pips, Spiders and Snakes by Jim Stafford, Nice to Be Around by Maureen McGovern, and the theme from MASH by Ahmad Jamal. Let me turn this because it's moving that up. In between each song, it's got Robert W. Morgan talking about how great the Army is. This is number 3 according to Discogs. I never saw a number on it, and there's nothing on it. Um, and I don't know if the number, is there a number? Does the number indicate 3? Series 3, yep, so it is through Robert W. Morgan for Today's Army. Number 9. Number 8, I talked about the first album on last week's show from 1973. The second and last album is from 1974. And yes, laugh at me. I don't care. The DeFranco Family, featuring Tony DeFranco and Save the Last Dance for Me. This includes their last top 40 hit, Save the Last Dance for Me, and one of the single, Write Me a Letter, which was remixed into a much more rock-heavy song for the single. The single's better than the album version. Also includes Love the Way You Do, The Only One, Because We Both Are Young, Hold Me, I Guess You Already Knew, Poor Boy, Baby Blue, and Maybe It's You. This is just great. It's filled with great pop songs, bubblegum songs all the way around. Has an ad for Tony's private photo album and the DeFranco Family Fan Club and The Secret of Tony DeFranco. All these silly little books that Loffer Publications used to publish. And of course, they were never featured in 16 because Loffer was their primary sponsor, and Loffer owned Tiger Beat. So 16 magazine never said word one about the DeFranco family, even when they were having hits. That's how the rivalry ran. Number 8 from 1974, great pop album all the way around. Yeah, dorky outfits, I know. Save the Last Dance for Me, Tony Orlando. I did it again. The DeFranco Family featuring Tony DeFranco. Coming in at number 7 on my list is this album. I've always loved this guy. And it's a bit confusing because people don't realize that even though his biggest hit came from this album, his first big hit came from this album, there was an earlier album in 1973. It was repackaged later. And then they repackaged this one. It also had come out. I did not realize this had originally come out on Bell, but it did. And when Bell morphed into Arista, they went back and repackaged both of them. And as a result, while he was having his first hit single on Bell, the album was out on Arista. Confusing people. But it's still one of my favorite albums by this guy who is still rocking, still performing. I can't say rocking because he never, I mean, he could do some up-tempo stuff, but rock, straightforward rock, yeah, every now and then. But he's still performing and still wowing people in Vegas year after year, and he's pushing 80. This is Barry Manilow 2. Barry Manilow 2 features his hit singles Mandy and It's a Miracle. Love that photo of him and his dog. Also includes I Want to Be Somebody's Baby, Early Morning Strangers, The Two of Us, Something's Coming Up, Avenue C, My Baby Loves Me, Sandra, one of the best story songs ever, and Home Again. Manilow was a master of the story tune. He absolutely was a master of a story tune, and it's one of the reasons I have loved him so much all these years. This originally did come with a lyric sleeve. I don't know if it's still in here. Let me take a look here. No, it didn't. It is not. I'll have to find that, but it's on that early Arista blue. Produced by Barry and Ron Dante. It's a great album if you like his style of middle-of-the-road pop. I Want to Be Somebody's Baby's actually got kind of a rock beat, and Avenue C is one of his jump-in songs for the jazzy style, which he loved and still does. And it's, of course, a classic, I believe, from the 1940s. He was always a terrific artist, and I have all of his albums through the mid-'80s, from 1970. I even bought the original Bell issue of Barry Manilow 1 from Dawn when it was just called Barry Manilow a few months ago. And I'd like to get this on Bell. I guess it is out on Bell, so I'd like to get this on Bell. But it's a great album, and if you like Barry Manilow, it's one of his best. Barry Manilow 2, number 7 on my list. Number 6 by one of my favorite singles acts. I bought practically every single these guys put out. Never picked up the albums until the last couple of years. Adam at Record Crates had several of them on sale, and I've grabbed them when I could, and just fell head over heels in love with them because they were one of the best harmony acts ever. Um, they had the two lead singers that did, one did the high voice, the other did the low voice, and they were just phenomenally good for an R&B act to be able to cross over as successfully as they did on the pop chart. Had in the mid 70s, had to have something special. R&B was pretty limited to the soul chart in the 70s. Now it's kind of everywhere, but back then it was the really top-notch acts that were crossing to the pop side too, on the top 40 side. These guys did it every freaking time. This is number 6 on my list. I picked this up a couple years ago. The Stylistics and Let's Put It All Together. This includes their hit of that name, as well as their, I believe, number 1 hit, You Make Me Feel Brand New. If it didn't hit number 1, it came damn close. Plus, I Got a Letter, We Can Make It Happen Again, Keeping My Fingers Crossed, I Got Time on My Hands, Doing the Streets, I Take It Out on You, Love is the Answer, the vocal, and then an instrumental version. Oh my God, what heavenly sounds these dudes make. I mean, the Stylistics are one of my all-time favorite acts. They just have amazing harmony. And I grew up listening to their stuff in the 70s, and I had 5 or 6 singles by them that I played. You Make Me Feel Brand New. I played it so much, I honestly don't think it probably could still be played. Um, and I liked Let's Put It All Together, but it wasn't my favorite of that genre. This is, of course, on that classic Avco, which is the purple. Avco later switched to an orange label around the time they were about ready to go under in the disco era with Van McCoy's Hustle. It was the first place I ever saw the orange label. I love this album. I cannot get enough of it since I got it. I've played it several times, and I may have even downloaded it. I don't remember. I adore the Stylistics, and I always will. They are just phenomenal. Number 6, the Stylistics, and Let's Put It All Together, from 1974, like everything else. I talked about my love for the leader of this band a couple shows ago when I showed their first album. This is their last album, and this is after they had a couple of personnel changes, and it didn't have any huge hits on it. But it does have one of my favorite songs by them. It has this cool poster that they have here. I think you can tell what it is from there. That came with it. I actually picked this up in the cutout bin in 1985 when I picked up all of their albums in the cutout bin for 10 cents. People don't know what they have and don't know what they're missing if they don't know the Raspberries. This is Starting Over from 1974, their final album. I'm only missing one album by them. Overnight Sensation, hit record, which was their minor hit off this. Play On, Party's Over, I Don't Know What I Want, Rose Colored Glasses, All Through the Night, Cruisin' Music, I Can Hardly Believe You're Mine, Cry, Hands on You, and Starting Over. Eric Carmen, of course, the leader of the band there. Scott McCarl and Michael McBride, I think, were new, and Wally Bryson was a part of the original band. I think. I'd have to go back and look. A couple of my friends online would probably know better because they're also fans. This album, Capitol Records again, is this, I think, on the green Capitol label? No, it's on the red, the salmon-colored Capitol label. Fabulous and fantastic. And the fact that it came with the poster, which I've kept pristine in the sleeve since I got it. Like I said, the earlier one still has the scratch and sniff. You can still smell the raspberries on it 50 years after it came out. It's a terrific album. They were always the closest thing I got to rock until Grand Funk came along. And they weren't really rock. They were more of a pop with heavy leanings. And Carmen, in his solo career, would, I can't get the poster back in here, would become a big part of my teenage years. Eric Carmen is just a genius as far as I'm concerned. Number 5 from 1974, The Raspberries and Starting Over. Number 4, again, this is an album that I knew all the singles from, but I had not actually had the album until last year. I'd heard it dozens of times because my cousin had it. My cousin worshipped the ground this man walked on. And I say cousin, he's not really related, but I consider that family and my family considered ourselves relatives. And it is a dynamite album, and I came close to buying it a couple of times when it was out because there's just amazing stuff on here. And there were 4 huge hits on this album, and one that came out later as a live single from the next album. Many people consider it his best album. It's his second best to me. I love what I already had, and I'll talk about that next year, 1975. But this album, it is everything that everybody's ever said about it, and it definitely deserves to be in that top 100 albums of all time that I've seen it on a few lists there, and it is just phenomenal. From 1974 again, John Denver, Back Home Again. This album is filled. You open that up. That's John and his first wife, Annie. This album features the hits Back Home Again, Grandma's Featherbed, Annie's Song, and Sweet Surrender, as well as the studio version of Thank God I'm a Country Boy, plus On the Road, Matthew, The Music Is You, It's Up to You, Cool and Greed and Shady, Eclipse, and This Old Guitar. Many of these are John Denver staples if you are a fan. I had 4 of the singles. I'd never had the album till last year, but I knew every single song because, as I said, Ray had this album when I was a kid growing up, played it constantly. Never did buy it because I always assumed I'd be able to listen to Ray's copy. Nope. So I finally did buy it when Adam had it on sale last year, completely intact with lyric sleeves. And what a phenomenal album. I know this is the critics' favorite, and the critics didn't like the next album. I did, and we'll talk about that next year. But 1974, number 4, John Denver and Back Home Again. Okay, number 3, showing my early rocking here. I'd been a fan for most of the previous 2 years. I had 3 or 4 of the singles. And I picked up the album later. I got it again in that same lot. I got a lot of great albums from the mid-70s and from a family friend who was moving and said, do you want these? And that included both of the Michael Nesmith albums. It included one of these. One of these? Well, no, not one of these. A couple of other ones. A couple of Yvonne Elliman albums. And this. And I had always loved this. But when I got it and I listened to it, I never stopped listening to it because it has probably my all-time favorite song by them on it, and it is their all-time favorite album in my opinion. I have a couple of other albums by them. I've heard a number of other albums by them. This is, except for the Greatest Hits album, they can't go wrong with this. It's just great from beginning to end. The Doobie Brothers, What Were Once Vices Are Now Habits, number 3. Another Park, Another Sunday, Blackwater, Daughters of the Sea, Down in the Track, Eyes of Silver, Flying Cloud, Pursuit on 53rd Street, Road Angel, Song to See You Through, Spirit, Tell Me What You Want and I'll Give You What You Need, and You Just Can't Stop It. I was starting 7th grade when Blackwater came out as a single. And, well, at least it was played a lot on the station I listened to. I love Blackwater. I love that song. It's my favorite Doobie Brothers song of all time. Sorry, Jeff. I know you don't care for it. The only thing that comes close, and this is still the Tom Johnston era, by the way, and Michael McDonald had not yet come on board. But this album, it transitions beautifully between songs. It has incredible instrumentation, incredible vocals. And Blackwater, I mean, some people really hate that song, and I don't get that. It's a great song. The harmonies, it's different for the Doobie Brothers. Yeah, it was a completely different direction, just like the Locomotion for Grand Funk was a different direction. Same year, too. But I will never stop loving this album, and I will always listen to it. This is one I do have on CD and digital, so you know I love it. What Were Once Vices Are Now Habits, number 3, the Doobie Brothers from 1974. Number 2 is another one of my silly albums, kids' albums. I've recently showed this on a number of different things I've done online. When I was a kid, my afternoons were taken up after school, especially there in Marne, before we moved back to Washington State. Were taken up by afternoon TV for kids. For us, that meant a 2.5 hour block of great shows on our local PBS channel. It would start with Sesame Street, which my friend Mark and I weren't necessarily interested in, but his little sister Michelle was very into it. We would frequently go to each other's house to watch it. I was usually at Mark's house because we lived next door to each other, and he had a color TV and we did not at the time. So I was always over there, and we were watching. We watched Sesame Street at 4, Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood at 5, The Electric Company at 5:30, and Zoom at 6 o'clock. Come On and Zoom, the original album of songs and stuff from the award-winning children's TV show, is number 2 on my list. Zoom is what made me want to be in Boston. Zoom and the French Chef. I wanted to be on Zoom when I was a kid. I thought that would be the coolest thing in the world. Many of them, a couple last year during 2021, they did a couple of reunion shows with the original first and second season casts of the show on WGBH's Zoom calls, no pun intended, and they were fun, and it was fun to get to hear from all the originals. Not very many of them were on this album. There were a couple. This is all the lyrics to all the songs. If you were a fan of Zoom in the 70s, then you know what it was. It was by kids, for kids. Everybody knew to get your Zoom card, you write Zoom, Box 350, Boston, Mass. 02134. I could not have made it through school without this album because I just had such a terrible time in school. And this album, which features original Zoom kids, Bernadette, the second, both, is the second one? I thought, no, he's on the other one. This album includes Bernadette, first Danny, David, Edith, Jay, Leon, Lori, Luis, Maura, and Mike. There's a later album called Zoom Tunes that has some other cast members. It's a great, great album, and I loved it, and I played it constantly. I got it for Christmas in 1974. It was the first album I got after going back to Washington from Ohio. My mom was determined to get out of Ohio after the April 3rd outbreak. We went back to Washington State, and this was under the Christmas tree. And I played it constantly. The Zoom theme, Stay All Night, Games, The Lollipop Tree, Witch's Brew, Michael Row the Boat Ashore, I Believe in Music, Twinkle, A Mad Tea Party, Piccolo Meanie, Ball on the Jack, Wishes, Fanny Dooley, Answer Song, Send It to Zoom, which is their address song, Fanny Dooley, Answer, Ubby Dubby, and the Zoom closing theme. I had a ton of Zoom cards when I was a kid. I would send for them every week. When it went daily in 74, I got to see more of it, all the older ones as well as the newer ones. And they were so much fun. And I bought the books, I got the albums. I love them, and I still love them. I love the revival in the 90s, too. I didn't watch it much, but I saw a few of them, and they did a great job with it. Now there's talk of a new one again, and who knows, maybe another generation will get the joys of Zoom in their life. Number 2, Come On and Zoom. The original album of songs and stuff with the cast of the award-winning children's television show from WGBH Television, Boston, Massachusetts, home of Zoom and the French Chef. We're up to number 1. And there's no Carpenter's album this time. Woo-hoo-hoo-hoo-hoo. That's because they didn't release a new album in 1974, in all honesty. The only thing that came out in 1974, the greatest hits album, the singles came out at the end of 1973, and they re-released a single of "I Won't Last a Day Without You" off of "A Song for You" in the summer of 1974. That was all they did in '74. Um, but number seven, 1974 brought another artist back to the forefront after over a decade away in America. And I would pick up this album in the summer of '75 after the first two hits off of it. I had both singles, the first two hits. And I would play the album constantly because so many people have recorded his songs over the years. There are those songwriters that everybody else records: Bob Dylan, the Beatles, Paul McCartney, John Lennon, Carole King. This guy is another one. And in the course of 3 or 6 months, he would have two monster hits off this, have another hit on his own, and the fourth song from this album would become the number one song of 1975 for the Captain and Tennille. Um, he was just an amazing artist, and I adore him to this day. Again, in his 80s, still kicking, still performing, still writing, and still fantastic. My number one album of 1974, Sedaka's Back from Neil Sedaka. This includes Standing on the Inside, That's Where the Music Takes Me, Laughter in the Rain, Sad Eyes, Solitaire, Little Brother, Love Will Keep Us Together, The Immigrant, The Way I Am, The Other Side of Me, A Little Lovin', and our last song together. This was his first of 2 or 3 albums on Elton John's Rocket Records, and it was composed mostly of songs that had been released in Britain between 1971 and 1974. What a great album this is. I mean, Neil Sedaka is just an amazing act to begin with, but his songwriting, I mean, it's just phenomenal. The Immigrant, which is a song he wrote about the plight of John Lennon versus the government, is a great song and can be used. I mean, I'm surprised immigration people have not, you know, grabbed that song as an anthem. It's terrific. Laughter in the Rain, when that hit the radio, I didn't know who Neil Sedaka was outside of "Oh Carol" and "Calendar Girl." I knew those songs, and "Breaking Up Is Hard to Do" had been recorded by the Partridge Family by that point. But I didn't really know much of his other stuff. I have a ton of Neil Sedaka stuff in my collection now. I have a ton of singles. I've had 2 or 3 of the albums. I bought 3 or 4 more from Adam. I just bought that deluxe CD set of all of his Elektra albums a couple months ago. I love the guy, and I wish I would love to get to see him. He's actually performed at Len Auditorium a couple of times in the last few years, and I wish I'd get to see him. Hopefully I will eventually, before he finally retires. He's still in marvelous health at 84 and doing wonderful music and still writing great stuff. There's a great documentary that the BBC did with him about 7 years ago on YouTube, if you want to look that up and take a look at his writing process. He describes his process of writing. It's fascinating, and talks about his career in that low time he had in America between 1964 and 1974. Really great stuff, and this album is great too. Just terrific stuff. Sedaka's Back, my number one album from 1974. Now, for those of you who are wondering, some of the stuff that made my also ran list, the orchestral Tubular Bells, which I just don't like as well as I like the original version, and I couldn't show that because I only have it on CD, from Mike Oldfield with the Royal Harmonic Orchestra. Court and Spark by Joni Mitchell, which I don't have a copy of. I've played it lots on Spotify and stuff because it's got all of her big hits on it. Dark Lady by Cher, which has Dark Lady, Train of Thought, and I Saw a Man and a Dance and His Wife. Don't have that on LP. Al Green Explores Your Mind. I only have the CD of that. Autobahn by Kraftwerk. I've only have a CD of that. So it's like I don't have them on vinyl, and this is Vinyl Recall, so I can't tell you enough about it. Going back through, once again, a recap. Number 10, I'm leaving it all up to you, Donnie and Marie Osmond. Number 9, Robert W. Morgan for Today's Army 3, with various artists and hosted by Robert W. Morgan. Number 8, Save the Last Dance for Me, the DeFranco Family featuring Tony DeFranco. Number 7, Barry Manilow 2, Barry Manilow. Number 6, Let's Put It All Together by the Stylistics. Number 5, Starting Over by the Raspberries. Number 4, John Denver, Back Home Again. Number 3, What Were Once Vices Are Now Habits, the Doobie Brothers. Number 2, Come On and Zoom, original cast album. And number 1, Sedaka's Back from Neil Sedaka. Excuse me for a second. Can't lift. I'm not supposed to lift more than a cup of coffee with my right hand until Monday. I have not been paying attention to it because I'm healing very well. I'm not gotten any soreness or anything from the procedure I had done, but it was still a scary procedure. 1975 will be interesting. 1975, I spent the entire year, the first 2 months of the year I spent in Wenatchee, Washington, where my stepfather's from, or where his parents were. The rest of the time I spent it on the coast in the Tacoma area. Not necessarily, actually outside of Tacoma on Key Peninsula, near a small little villages called Key Center and Lake Bay. We went into Tacoma all the time, and so I picked up quite a few things. It's mostly singles again. Albums are hard to come by. But 1975 is when I really, really, really got into music. I started toying with my own charts, which wouldn't go full until 1978. And never missed Casey Kasem's American Top 40. And was full into music and variety shows and stuff. I loved all that stuff, and I still do. And the albums that I bought in 1975 had to be special because I didn't have that much money. Back then, albums were roughly $4.99, sometimes $5.99. And with the exception of birthday and Christmas, when I'd get a little extra money, maybe $20 or $30, I only had a $5 allowance every week, so I had to be very careful. I just spent it frugally or save up to get albums. And that's what I did. And so we will talk about my year of being 12 on the next Vinyl Recall. If you haven't subscribed already, please do. And if you have, thank you very much. I really appreciate it. And please leave a comment. I love hearing from you. And I'd especially love to hear what you think of my album choices because I know they're way out there from the rest of the vinyl community. These are not your typical classic rock top 10, punk top 10, progressive top 10s. These are pop. I'm fully pop. I can't help the way I am. I can't help the way my music brain is wired. I still love what I love, and that's all you can do. For Vinyl Recall, I'm TC Kirkham. We'll see you next time. Ciao, baby.